Welcome to our 21st edition of Rising Tide. This is David Helvart, our co-host, Vicki Nichols-Goldstein.
Hello there.
And today we're talking to a friend of ours, an acoustician and a naturalist, Michael Stalker, who's the founding director of Ocean Conservation Research, which seeks to understand the impacts of human-generated noise on the natural marine wildlife and use that understanding to inform ocean policy and practices. So, Michael, I think this is something people don't think a lot about when they think about the ocean, which is how sound acts as the light of the ocean, how it allows all the ocean's creatures to feed and breed and connect with each other. How'd you get to start thinking about this?
Well, it started out quite a while back. I am actually a musician by avocation, and I love the ocean. We spent a lot of time in the ocean. My dad was born on the ocean. We had boats, and so and my mom would take me down to the beach and drop me in a tide pool and crack a novel, and she'd be done for the day.
And what beach was that?
Laguna, Little Laguna was a nice tide pooly beach.
California.
And Southern California was really great. So yeah, that's kind of how I started. I wanted to be a marine biologist. At that time, Jacques Cousteau had his misnomered series called the Monde du Silence, the Silent Sea. Far from it. When I was about 7 years old, I went to an aquarium, and it was Morro Bay. It was a very humble little aquarium, but they had a hydrophone in one of the tanks, and they had all these bass in there that were clorking and cracking and creaking away. And it's just like, whoa! I wanted to get a hydrophone from my own aquarium, my home aquarium, and so I kind of started it. But when I was in high school, I was looking forward to my biology class, but my biology teacher was so tedious, I decided I was going to do music, and I fell back into that and worked in the business for a while.
Did that include a garage band?
Oh, many. Oh, yeah, tons. We had a little chicken shack with egg cartons nailed up on the walls, for acoustic treatment. It was really a disaster. But yeah, we did a lot of that stuff. And then, in 1990, I was still interested in biology, although I didn't pursue that in school. The Navy was proposing this long distance, ATOC, acoustic tomography of ocean climate. They were going to be kicking noises across ocean basins and measuring things that way. And it was a brilliant idea from a physical oceanography standpoint. From a biological standpoint, lousy idea.
Tell us more about ATOC.
Okay, so the idea is this. There is a direct correlation between how fast sound travels in the ocean and the density of the water. And the density of water is mediated by two things. It's mediated by salinity, and it's also mediated by pressure. There is a isothermic layer in the ocean called the SOFAR layer, and it has been the same temperature since the Ice Age, and so they can actually project the sound through it. And if they see any perturbations in that, they'll be able to determine whether or not there's density changes having to do with things like El Nino or La Nina or other types of current changes, and be able to get a read like tomography, kind of like sonograms, except it's low frequency. And it was an interesting idea. So that's kind of the premise of it. But the hidden agenda, which nobody's really even spoken about much, is that if you can get a coherent signal across an ocean basin, you can use it to communicate. And at that time, in the early 90s, submarines were being revealed at that time, they had a low frequency radio frequency communication system to talk to submarines. And they had these long, like 2 kilometer long antennas they would have to drag on top of the ocean. But if you had a magnetometer on a satellite, you could tell where all the submarines were. So they had to figure out how to communicate with submarines surreptitiously. And I think, although nobody's talking about it, that ATOC also served as a testing ground for that type of communication system.
And what got your interest in this? I mean, you were a musician, you were doing acoustics for music. What got you engaged in the arrival of this ATOC project?
Well, I knew that the the animals in the ocean use sound to get around because, you get down a few hundred feet, it's dark. There's nothing down there except for bioluminescence. So the way most animals communicate in the ocean is through sound. They understand their surroundings, the proximity of threats, the location of conspecifics, whether or not there's turbulence coming your way or this type. There's a lot of components to this. And animals in the ocean have adapted amazing ways to essentially hear their surroundings. And I was wise to that. And this first kind of idea of insanifying the ocean sounded like a really lousy idea. I mean, at that time, we knew that the humpback whales were communicating with these really magnificent, long, detailed songs or legacy songs. So that was going to interfere with that.
And there's the famous songs of the humpback whale that kind of popularized this idea of natural sound in the ocean.
First platinum album by Animal.
When was that?
And I had that.
1972. Yeah, it was Roger Payne, and yeah, he recorded these. It was the Bahamas Humpbacks were the band.
So, Michael, moving forward with recognizing that it's very important to have a somewhat quiet ocean, minus human-made noises, and we've dealt with ATOC, and we were able to move that out of the sanctuary through many efforts. Tell us a little bit about what's happening now with ocean sounds and human-induced impacts around that topic.
Well, the most pervasive sound, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, is the sound of shipping. And international trade has increased since 1960s to the point where the ocean is 10 times louder now than it was in 1970. And it's all shipping noise, this kind of low frequency grumbling, thrashing noise. And that is interfering with animals' ability to be able to, sense things in their surroundings. We know that whales, for example, the baleen whales have these very low frequency signals that they kick out, which you can hear 2,000-3,000 miles away. And, they do that for a reason. It's not just being, audacious. They actually do that for navigation purposes, to communicate and what have you. Well, if we have this rise in the noise floor at that very frequency that these animals are using, it's going to narrow their ability to be able to hear what distances their sounds conferred to them as they evolved into the ocean habitat.
So wasn't the first big controversy about ocean noise, or anthropogenic, I should say, human-caused ocean noise, real around the Navy using these low-frequency sonars that impacted those kind of whales in the Bahamas and elsewhere? I mean, there have been several books like Whale Wars written about the conflict between the Navy and its impacts on whales and other marine mammals.
Well, the ATOC thing proved a point. We could get coherent sounds across ocean basins. That had actually been proven before, but we were able to run they were able to run a program to be able to confirm that. Then the Navy decided they wanted to use these low frequency sounds to find submarines, basically through same type of thing. It's just long wavelength, low frequency signals that when they bounce back to the boats, they can determine if there's something moving within the field of the sound. That was in 1999 to 2000. In the midst of the hearings on that low frequency active sonar, there was a tragedy that happened in the Bahamas where they were using mid-frequency sonar, the Navy was, and in the midst of this exercise, 17 beaked whales and 1 minke whale stranded all over in this area where they were doing these exercises. And Ken Balcom was down there. He was studying these beaked whales. They're very interesting animals. They spend about 2% of their life close to the surface of the water, and the rest are down thousands of feet at certain points. So he had been studying these whales. He was fast enough to cut a couple of heads off of these animals and freeze them and send them off to the lab, where they found a number of things that were alarming. One of them was that their hearing organs were completely emulsified, and the rest of their organs, their blood was full of bubbles, like something akin to the bends, where essentially you get these bubbles that emulsify their blood.
When divers or others rise up too suddenly in the water column.
Right, and that so the speculation, there was a lot of speculation on that, but I think the narrative, which seems to be the most popular right now, is that these animals were down really deep. They were foraging down there. All of a sudden, this Navy sonar comes in, this mid-frequency sonar, pokes their ears out with ice picks, because it's a horrible sound. In fact, I'll play a little bit of this. Well, that they were completely startled, having been deafened immediately, and they rose to the surface to get air, because that's really the first, they're air-breathing animals. So they rose to the surface. Typically, beaked whales come up in stages. They decompress in stages, and the thought was these animals were so shocked that they just headed to the surface as fast as they could. And that was the cause of their death. Not so much that the sonar specifically killed them, but it set them up for an unpleasant, untimely death.
And so this led to years of protest and litigation about the Navy use of these sonars.
Well, the noise issue came up on everybody's sonar, and I was at that time, I had been writing papers, white papers and things, some peer-reviewed stuff for various organizations like Earth Island and World Wildlife, and I think I did one for NRDC, talking about this stuff because it was starting to come up in the in the public sphere, and I became a science advisor for a small nonprofit that was good at organizing, but they didn't have necessarily the scientific data, and so I was working with them for a number of years until I founded Ocean Conservation Research.
You wanted to look at the whole issue of human noise in the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, it's so the shipping noise is part of it, but we're introducing all kinds of other noises, not just from transportation, but we're underwater communication systems, seal bombs. I mean, there's amazing amount of seal bombs that go off, I mean, thousands sometimes a day in the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. This is a huge problem. Can
you clarify what a seal bomb is for those listeners?
Yeah, a seal bomb is what fishermen use them when they have seals that are predating on their catch, whether it's line catch or net catch. They can throw these, they're like little M80s in the water, and they explode, and they annoy the seals and hopefully scare the seals away. I founded Ocean Conservation Research in 2007, largely because the organization that I was working with wasn't moving fast enough in terms of the science and the policy work. So I wanted to roll up my sleeves and really grab it by the horns, so to speak, to mix metaphors, but I wanted to get into this a lot deeper. So I started going to Washington, D.C. on a more regular basis. I started going to offshore oil technologies conferences. There's an underwater industry that is incredibly noisy. They have these, the deep water horizon disaster. I mean, I wish somebody had stuck a hydrophone in the water and recorded that, because it would have been amazing. But those offshore rigs don't just, they don't stick a straw in the ground and suck up oil. They have seafloor processing. So they have compressors and multi-phase pumps, and all this stuff is roaring away. And that's yet another underwater industry. And now they're starting to really get into this idea of mining, strip mining the ocean. And that's going to be another, aside from other problems with silt and what have you, a noise source.
I guess the biggest controversy about ocean noise since the Navy sonars has been the idea of oil exploration ships. And I don't know if you've been involved in that.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have to find the oil. And so one of the ways they do that is they have these seismic survey ships. And they kick off these explosions every 10 to 15 seconds around the clock. And it can sound like this. And we were just up in the Cook Inlet last fall. We put some instruments down to measure the noise of these things. They were doing a survey in the Cook Inlet. It was a relatively small array, but it was loud. And we're working on the data right now in terms of how it scared the whales and most of the whales away from the area.
Michael, has there been any data on what these impacts are? We know they're very loud. We know it disturbs them. It impacts migration, feeding, mating. But is there any kind of quantifiable evidence about what is actually happening due to sound?
Well, there's a number of really telling studies, but I think one of the more, it's really telling, and it was kind of an opportunity that happened. Susan Parks was recording the sounds of the North Atlantic right whale up in the Bay of Fundy area. At the same time, this woman, Rosalind Rowan, was measuring the cortisol levels in their feces. And so they have essentially this situation where they know how stressed out, the cortisol is a proxy for stress. And they know how stressed out these animals are. Right after the 9/11 Twin Towers disaster happened, they shut down shipping pretty much worldwide for about a week or so. And when they did that, the noise levels went down another 6 to 8 dB, twice, maybe 3 times, less volume, if you will. And the cortisol levels immediately dropped, exactly the same amount, at the same time. And then when the noises started up again, the cortisol levels started rising. So it was a really indisputable direct correlation between shipping noise and the stress of these animals. It's a qualitative thing. I live in the country, and when the airplanes were all grounded due to this COVID thing, the birds were having a riot. I mean, the dawn chorus was waking me up. It was so loud. Well, is that a bad thing? No, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And the same in the ocean. The sound in the Arctic, which is stunningly gorgeous. And I'll play a little bit of this. This is Arctic sounds off of Barrow, Alaska, off the lead ice in Barrow, Alaska in April. And as you can hear, there are all kinds of ring seals, bearded seals, and bow-headed whales, and they're just this breeding season. So they're just having a party, and there's no ships up there. Well, we're going to start putting ships up there as the ice melts back, and that's going to change their whole habitat.
You had talked about one good experiment on marine mammal stress was after 9/11, the shipping up in Canada that went away. We've had this year-long experiment unintended with the COVID pandemic. I just read an article where the whales are more active up in Glacier Bay because the tour ships have gone away. Are there any experiments today looking at a less noisy ocean and how it's impacting wildlife?
The papers are pretty much in review right now. And I think what some people are waiting for is for it to return to quote unquote normal and then do some comparative, have a baseline where it's quieter and then get back to noisy again. But the papers, some are in review, but there's going to be a whole rash of papers coming out on the impact of noise on marine habitat.
What are some of the solutions? I mean, it's, as you say, shipping has increased. Obviously, we don't need to be searching for oil because of climate change. We need to be getting off oil. But even offshore wind turbines will be noisy. Our ports are very active. The Navy continues to operate its sonars. How do we find solutions for the human noise we're putting into the ocean?
Well, I mean, fortunately, the IMO, International Maritime Organization, is actually concerned about this, but there's also a win-win there because noise is also a proxy for inefficiency. So if they can come up with more efficient ways of driving their ships around, it'll be, less fuel consumptive and less noise. So that's a good thing.
And the IMO is what oversees the whole global commercial shipping fleet.
Correct. Yeah. And so they're on board. I am concerned because increasingly the Navy's got some proposals out, the Neptune and Janus programs, where they want to have underwater GPS so that they can run autonomous vessels anywhere in the world and they know where they are. Well, just doing the math on that signal will probably be between 8 and 12 kilohertz. And that means we could hear it just to, let you know that it might cause some human concern, but you can hear this through the hull of your boat. You hear this jingling sound, beautiful moonlit night on a smooth bay, and you're going to hear this coming through the hull of your boat. So it's going to give people a taste of what animals are going to have to suffer if, in fact, they do try to get this thing going. Hopefully, this next administration is going to get, read the tea leaves on fossil fuel, and we're not going to have to worry about offshore seismic surveys after a certain point. But the underwater communication stuff, I mean, we really have to keep our shoulder to that, because people still don't think it's problematic. They don't see animals as one of my Navy colleagues said, jumping out of the water to get away from the noise. Well, no, they don't. I mean, but when you have, if your refrigerator's compressor is broken and it's going all night long, it's annoying. Animals are sentient, and they're not just behaviors in a bag of protein. They actually think too. They get bothered by stuff.
Well, it's great that your organization and you have been really bringing light to this issue of underwater sound. Everything from ATOC to everything you're talking about, shipping, oil exploration. And I'm hoping that more and more people start to recognize the importance of nature sounds, both in the air and in the water, and that we can maybe begin to address it on a more comprehensive level during this next administration. So I'm looking forward to your continued ideas as we, bring this to light and start thinking about, wow, what a noisy environment that ocean is, and how nice would it be if we were to let the animals have their habitat and their space.
Who are among your favorite marine animals to listen in on?
Oh, the ice seals. Just they sound like out of space. I mean, it's dark in the Arctic and Antarctic certain times of the year, and these animals have these stunning sounds. And I mean, I'll just play one of them here.
If people are interested in your trips to Baja to visit with the whales, or just want to learn more about the whole OCR project, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, OCR.org is easy to remember. That has pretty much all the information about and how to contact us. And of course, there's a lot of papers and a lot of videos. We're putting a video series together on animal communication right now. Daniela, who's our communications and media director, is doing an excellent job on this stuff. So we'll have that stuff come up. You can sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter comes out once or twice, sometimes 3 times a month. We have also ocean-noise.com, and that is a blog site that talks about what we've been doing since 2007.
Thank you, Michael. And take us out with some wonderful animal sounds.
Okay, this is some reef sounds. This will be nice.
Rising Tide is a production of Blue Frontier with host David Helberg and support from Natasha Benjamin, Ellie Curlow, and myself, Vicki Nichols-Goldstein. Rising Tide's editing services and additional technical support are provided by Studio Cape May of San Diego, California. The theme song is written and performed by Ethan Kenbarg. You can find Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast, at www.bluefront.org or download it anytime from Apple, Google, or Spotify.
Off in the salty ocean, off where the waves roll free, the sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the Blue Frontier. Off in the salty ocean, off to the Blue Frontier.
Sparky, come here, buddy. Sparky! There you are, good boy, Sparky.